again, and today we're going to be discussing the book and movie Diary of a Wimpy Kid. The author is Jeff Kinney. The book series, the first book was published in 2007, and since then there have been 14 books after the original, and the last one came out in 2019. And yeah, it was a New York Times bestseller. I can't speak apparently. It's this hardcover book. It's a quick read of 270 pages, and it has a graphic novel-like style with comic drawings on every page and big text written like an actual middle schooler. And part of that is the reason of the success. It looks like a middle schooler wrote it, and it's for middle schoolers, and it's very, very relatable to them. It has the same kind of language they would use. There's some funny things like how they capitalize certain words to emphasize things, the humor in it. And yeah, it's just very relatable to any kids, pretty much. Some basic facts about the movie is that the director is Thor Freudenthal. I'm very sorry if I butchered that. He is a German director, and the movie came out just a couple of years later after the book in 2010, and it engrossed $75.7 million in the box office, and since has released 3 other sequels, one in 2011, another in 2012, and another in 2017. They all share the same title and of other books, but they share stories from other books in the series, as well as additional material that they made up, but still has the same Diary of a Wimpy Kid spirit in them. And another change is in 2017, due to original cast growing up and stuff, they decided to completely recast it, as well as it can be for a new generation enjoying the books and movies. So, brief history on Diary of a Wimpy Kid, as well as Jeff Kinney, is that he originally wanted to be a cartoonist for the paper, but got rejected. After that, he got a job designing online games, as well as the very popular Pop Tropica that also came out in 2007. While he was working on the design for that, he was writing Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and it was originally supposed to be a 1,300-page long book meant for adults, to serve a nostalgic purpose. However, his editor thought it would be perfect for kids, and the drafts took him about 8 years to complete. In an interview, Jeff Kinney revealed that he wanted a relatable character for kids. "I wanted to create a character who was more like I was," he said, "average with some wimpy moments." He sees his books as gateway reading, not the kind of books that kids will want to read their whole life, but at least get them motivated to read more. He was also the executive producer for the film, so he was able to approve of anything that was done, as he felt they captured the same Diary of a Wimpy Kid idea that he was getting at. And he used the money from his franchise to build a bookstore where he lives in Massachusetts. And it is more than just a bookstore, it's also a cafe and overall place for the community to come and do cultural events and such. Brief synopsis of the book, and a little bit of the movie. So, like I said, the series overall, it follows a new to middle schooler, Greg Heffley. The series shows life adjusting in middle school, family, and friendships, and how he wants to be popular and recognized for how awesome he is. But he feels stuck where he is now, as he's just average. For the sake of time, I'll only cover the real details of the first book. All the other books, like I said, have the same themes as mentioned before. So Greg, in the first book, just starts middle school, and right away he's trying to be popular. He's trying to reinvent his friend Rowley and him to become these really cool middle schoolers. However, Rowley decides to be himself, and that ends up making him popular. And that makes Greg upset, so he kind of does some bad things within their friendship. He blames some things on Rowley, gets him in trouble, and Rowley and him don't speak for a while. But then Rowley and Greg are fighting when they are suddenly harassed by older teens who force Rowley to eat the rotting cheese that has sat outside the school for who knows how long. The next day, their classmates find out it's missing, and to make up for his mistakes, Greg admits to picking it up and throwing it away because he was sick of it. His classmates all thought it was gross that he touched the cheese and avoided Greg. That act of social suicide caused Rowley to hang out with Greg again. And although they're still best friends, Greg can't help in the end but remain a little bit jealous of Rowley, as he got in the yearbook for class clown instead of him. The movie did the exact same thing, added a couple more things, but also changed the ending just a little bit, where the classmates find out that someone ate the cheese right away. And because of that, Greg takes the ultimate blame for eating it. But instead of just like saying he ate it to eat it, he makes this whole speech of how he did it, because everything is meaningless in middle school. He goes on to say that cheese shouldn't matter, and that just middle school social status is overrated, and that he learns and accepts that middle school is stupid, or the status of it is. But his classmates still outcast him for eating the cheese, but he regained Rowley's friendship as well as Angie, their other friend. Rowley and Greg both end up in the yearbook this time at the end for cutest friends, and I like that ending better. It's more of a lesson learned, and really shows the suckiness of middle school that Greg realizes and just accepts, which is great. So a little bit about the characters. I already went over Greg pretty much, the one who wrote the journal, and your main character. Show off, relatable, arrogant, wants to be popular, as well as the middle child in his family. Rowley, I also kind of went over as the best friend. He's also childish and optimistic, and close with his family. As seen an only child. He's also the character who's very true to himself, very true to being who he is, even if people might think he's weird for that. And he shows in the end that he was right by doing that, as he becomes more popular by everyone, as they find him a very funny person to be around. And then there's Roderick, who is the older brother. He is a very stereotypical teenage boy. He's in a band. He likes to harass Greg, and yeah, in the end, he becomes more of a likable character. But at first, he's just seen as a jerk. But he loves Greg. He just doesn't say it and has an awful way of showing it. Then there's Manny. He's the younger brother, and once again, very stereotypical toddler. He's spoiled. He's a tattletale, especially on Greg, and he gets away with a lot just because he's the youngest. And then there's Angie. I didn't know if I wanted to include her, but I figured I would, because she isn't mentioned in any of the books, but she was just added into the movie. And I think that's because, as you can see, there's not a big female representation, as Greg doesn't have a lot of female friends. So I think they wanted to add her in there for that reason, as well as she's a very ironic character. She's a 7th grader, which means she's already been there a year, and because of that, she just picks out all the flaws of middle school. My favorite line from her is how she describes middle school as an intellectual wasteland, and she just loves to ridicule the popular kids and just be a social justice warrior for that middle school equality. Very fresh to the audience. For representation of youth, moral, and ethics, I also added my sources right here if you want to look into it more. But yeah, as mentioned, the big middle school status, popularity, as well as social clips and stereotypes within school. Greg discusses popularity right away. He says, I've been trying to be a lot more careful about my image ever since I got to middle school. And he explains how his parents don't understand middle schoolers at all because of this. Like I said about Angie, she says some ironic truths about middle school and refers to it as an awkward transition between kid and adulthood. There's also just other stereotypes with who likes who, as you can see in that picture. Where you sit at the lunch table, popularity if you get in the yearbook, very much those sort of things. Friendship, like I mentioned before, is a very important theme, as it deals with Greg and Rowley's friendship and if it will fall out or not because of jealousy, or Greg trying to fix Rowley, as well as Rowley just trying to be an individual from Greg because of Greg's selfish behavior and him just trying to be on his own. And that's okay. Then a little bit about family, because as I said, Greg is a middle child, and because of that, he has trouble with his brothers quite a few times, and as well as what he thinks of his parents and their different parenting styles and such. For growing up, this is kind of an overtone within the story, as it's because it's written like a middle schooler. It shows middle school's thoughts and their lack of knowledge of how to deal with their feelings and how they avoid them. And especially for Greg and how he doesn't admit to his feelings, probably because it is from a male perspective. Greg never says how he feels or if he's feeling like isolated or alone, but you can tell because he uses anger instead. Very interesting to reread and see those little subtle things. Controversial subject matter. As I said before, there's some bullying and harassment in it. Greg acknowledges the bullying in middle school, as well as the harassment, like when those teens force Rowley to eat the cheese. There's some minor middle school language, like morons, idiots, that kind of fun stuff. Then there is toxic masculinity. I did not see this at first. It was me rereading it. It was because in the beginning, it is like literally on the first page, Greg goes into a rant of how he's mad that his mom got him a diary when he specifically asked for a journal, and how a diary could get him bullied and how it'll look too girly and stuff. And it's like that sort of thinking right away, where it's like that shouldn't be a reason you get harassed because you're writing down your feelings. But toxic masculine environment makes Greg feel pressured to act a certain way and to feel a certain way, which is apparently not at all. It is also mentioned again on this page. I added the dialogue in the corner if you want to read that. But it was about Greg reflecting on something that happened in his past when he wanted a Barbie dream house, but his dad said no because he needed to get something more appropriate. Probably the start of the toxic masculine environment, and middle school does not help that. Religious overtones, there are none, although there are some mentions of him going to church sometimes, but nothing really as an overtone. And is it a bad example? Shocker, it is not actually banned. That is actually shocked, because if you would have seen in my other video, a lot of books get banned for stupid reasons. But no, there's nothing wrong with Diary of a Wimpy Kid, although some parents, some very weird parents, might feel uneasy about their children reading it, as they might identify with the main character, Greg, who would be selfish and lazy and get him in trouble. So, the cultural impact and final thoughts of Diary of Wimpy Kid. For Jeff Kenny's comment on gateway reading, I very much agree. Some reasoning for that is because I read these books when I was 7, and I didn't know if I'd like them at first. I was obsessed. I'd finish them within a day. I couldn't wait for the next book to come out, and it was like that until 8th grade, I'd say. And then I looked back at them in high school, and I was like, why did I like these? These were so cheesy. But now looking back, it's like, oh yeah, that was like the first series I was really hooked on. If I didn't read that series, would I have been introduced to other great series? I don't know. And he must be doing something right, because there's like a little drawing of me reading the first book and my 7-year-old niece now reading the newest 15 book. That is because she is now 7. She loves the series. She's reading them, and I really hope that will inspire her to read more great books. And my last, two little notes. If parents find these books controversial, they need to get out of the little bubble that they're in, because, like I said, these books are harmless. Greg is relatable, and if he seems like a jerk, well, yeah, that's kind of the point. It's ironic. Kids are self-centered in middle school. Your kid is self-centered in middle school. It's something to laugh about later on. Trust me, I did rereading these books. And some things that I wish that they could add, or maybe Jeff Kenny can add later on in the series, is more diversity. The movie is very white. In book, race is not very obvious, but I think they're white. I don't know. He could at least put in some more cultural effects in the books. And maybe some deeper meaning, because he just got to the tip of the iceberg of popularity and status in middle school. There's a lot of other things that kids can deal with that he can help them with that. And it'd be interesting to see the series move forward with that. But hey, like I said, he must be doing something right. So that concludes this little presentation. I hope you learned more about Diary of a Wimpy Kid.